Hello and welcome to cmqs, the Scottish Sun's politics show. My name's Conor Matchett. I am the political editor at the paper, and you may have noticed that we're in a slightly different location with a slightly different guest in place of Chris Musson, which is the one and only First Minister of Scotland, and SNP leader, of course, John Swinney. First Minister, welcome to cmqs.
Thank you very much, Conor. It's lovely to be with you.
Fantastic. I did detect a little bit of nervousness among your staff just before we came in here about the big red buzzer of waffle, which I have introduced you off camera as well. But don't worry, like the presiding officer, I'll be kind at points, stricter at others.
I do hope you've got no reason to press it.
Well, we'll see. We'll have to give it a go. Before we get into the nitty-gritty hard stuff, you said, I think, in the last couple of weeks that you're going to be around until 2031, hopefully as First Minister after the next election. What counts as winning in 2026 for you?
Obviously, I'd like to get an overall majority in the Scottish Parliament, but obviously emerging as the largest party and being able to be the First Minister would be winning for me.
Do you really believe you can stick around all the way to 2031? You were all but retired last year.
I stepped back voluntarily in 2023 after a long ministerial career. My party obviously faced difficulties. They asked me to come back. I had the benefit, the big thing for me is I had the benefit of a year out of the front line. I didn't have a year off. I had a year in a different space without the pressures of frontline politics. It's completely and utterly rejuvenated me. So yes, I can.
Nicola Sturgeon was often criticised for failing to bring through the new generation of the SNP. Who do you think is, among the current MSPs, could be the First Minister after you?
I'm not going to speculate on future candidates. I'm going to be around for a long time, subject to the views of the electorate, and I'm sure there'll be, there are plenty of very good people who are in the SNP who are a lot younger than me.
Such
and
as?
I'm not going to give you names. They'll all have their moment.
Stephen Flynn wants your job though, doesn't he?
Stephen's a great and accomplished talent, and there's lots of other people who are great and accomplished talents in the SNP, and I'm sure that they'll all find their role to perform, and I'll certainly nurture them because I want to have the best group of people available to me to serve Scotland. Do
you think that Stephen's in line for a cabinet job if you guys win the next election and he ends up there?
We've got lots and lots of hypotheticals in there. You know, we've got an election to win first, and that's what I've got to make sure is what we do.
Nicola Sturgeon and Operation Branchform hang like a bit of a thundercloud over the SNP at the minute. Would you like that to be over sooner rather than later? I'm
not going to talk about Operation Branchform. I think we've been around the houses. You've had loads of opportunities to ask me. I'm not going to change my view. It's a live police investigation, and I'm not going to say anything about it.
You must have an opinion, though, about how it's going.
There's kind of no way of asking this question that will get me saying anything other than that I'm not commenting about a live police investigation.
Obviously, we spoke about this in a huddle the other day about Nicola Sturgeon's recent split from her husband. There were lots of conspiracies about Nicola Sturgeon over the years. Were you aware of those rumours while you were her number two?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So nothing about Judy Murray's house
French diplomats? I have no idea what you're talking about, and it's none of my business.
What do you think of people who are spreading those sorts of rumours?
I think people should just let people get on with their own lives and not comment on other people's lives.
You've raised concerns in recent days about Alex Salmond's behaviour while you were in his government and while he was First Minister. If you were so concerned enough to speak out and stop it in the moment, why didn't you speak out about at the time?
I've said all I'm really going to say about this, and we went through this in a press huddle yesterday, and what I said yesterday is I've said what I've said, and here we are again talking about the same stuff, so I'm just going to say I've said what I've said.
But there's some people who'll look at that and go, you were part of it, Nicola Sturgeon was part of it, you didn't say anything at the time, you've got the opportunity to explain why.
I think we've all got to move on from that, Conor.
You think it was because it would have harmed independence?
I think we've all just got to move on.
What do you... would you apologise to Moira Salmond for getting involved at the weekend?
I simply answered a question that was put to me on live television. I didn't script the question. I'm not scripting your questions just now. No. I don't script the questions that get put to me. I answer them. I try to answer questions that are put to me. I do it as clearly and as openly as I can. I do that. That's my standard in all things. And once I've said what I've said, it's a matter of public record. I don't need to repeat it.
All right, well, let's shift on to a bit of government issues rather than personalities. You gave a speech on child poverty this week. You said it's your defining and central mission in government to specifically eradicate child poverty. So let's take a look at the basics. What's the current level of relative child poverty in Scotland?
The level of relative child poverty in Scotland is about 23%.
What's the current level of absolute child poverty?
It's about 30%.
And what are the government's legal targets for reducing those measures of child poverty?
Well, they've got to be by 2024, we've got to be at about 19% on relative poverty.
So I've got it as 18% and 14%. And we'll know in March if they're hit. Do you really believe that by 2030, which is those legal targets of 10%, 5%, that they'll be hit?
Yes, I think they can be if we get the right impetus of policy. So one of the challenges that we faced about child poverty, and I made this point yesterday, if you go back to the early years of the SNP government, we were taking measures on child poverty. So was the UK government under Gordon Brown, and cumulatively we were seeing child poverty falling. We then get 14 years of austerity, and despite how hard we've tried, and actually in that 14 years we've got to a position where child poverty levels are lower in Scotland comparatively than the rest of the UK. Why? Because we're taking extra actions to tackle child poverty, principally around, for example, the Scottish Child Payment. So if we get a fair wind, a complementary policy between the Scottish and UK governments, well, nobody should doubt the Scottish government's going to do everything we can to tackle child poverty. But we just need, if we've got a sort of sympathetic prevailing wind from the UK government, then the more progress we can make.
I mean, that's a long way of saying we don't think so.
No, it's not. It's about saying that I think there's a lot that we can do. I'm certainly going to leave no stone unturned in my actions. If you look at the government's budget that's coming forward, it is a budget focused on eradicating child poverty. So you've got the steps we're taking on the Scottish Child Payment, on affordable housing, on early learning and childcare, on support for local authority services, on
just because we've got a lot of time, a lot of people would have seen it.
So we're maxing out what we can do in the Scottish budget to tackle child poverty, and we'll continue to do so.
Do you not accept that you'll have failed as First Minister, particularly if you're in office until 2031, like you hope, if those legally binding targets are missed?
Well, let me have a good go at it, Conor. And you've got full-on John Swinney just now, and I'm going to do.
Is this what full-on John Swinney?
This is what, believe you me, this is full-on John Swinney, and frankly, like John Swinney's never been before. So it is full-on.
So let's shift to the NHS. I think you were pictured this week with sleeves rolled up in full-on John Swinney mode in A&Es, presumably trying to reassure.
Actually, see that picture? That wasn't taken when I was on an A&E visit, because I said I didn't want a camera with me when I went to the emergency department of the Royal Infirmary, because I wanted to see as it was. It wasn't a kind of politician visits dada. It was politician goes there, First Minister goes there to see what is it like. Tell him it the way it is, and it was incredibly valuable doing that. Now the other photograph was taken when I went to another hospital and I had my sleeves rolled up in slightly calmer environment. in
that mould of seeing how it is, I know you were asked about it at FMQs today, but there's Royal College of Nursing report talking about how nurses are traumatised by the sights of patients having heart attacks in corridors and that sort of thing. How can that be a thing in 21st century Scotland?
There's a huge amount of congestion in their emergency departments, and it's been made acute by the colossal number of flu cases that we've been dealing with. So that's been the survey you're talking about, which I completely accept the comments made by members of the Royal College of Nursing. But those comments have been made at the most acute intensity of the Christmas and New Year period, with massive rises in flu cases.
It sounds like you're minimising what they're saying, and that it's not like that all year.
No. Well, if I'm doing that, I'm sorry for suggesting that. I'm taking that seriously. I'm acknowledging it, but I'm explaining that it's come at a moment of absolutely colossal intensity in the health service. Now, thankfully, those cases are now receding, and the report I got last night is that the pressure in the health system, it's not gone away, it's less intense than it was, is probably the fairest way I could describe it.
Well, let's talk about something that's not got less intense, which is waiting lists. I think in 2021, you were COVID Recovery Secretary. There were 603,231 people on NHS Scotland waiting lists. Plan published in 2021, pledging to turn that round. That's up 43% now. We've got 863,535. I mean, that plan's failed. What are you saying to people that are on these waiting lists?
What's happened is that because of the gap during the COVID period of addressing a lot of health conditions, and then the fact that because of that and the intervening period, people have, they've got more health complications and more health challenges. So one of the points it was very clear to me when I was in the A&E department at the Royal Infirmary in Edinburgh, was a point made to one of the consultants that people are coming in with more complexity, so it's taken them longer to support people properly than it would have done in previous years. Now that obviously has an effect on throughput. So what we're trying to do is to expand national treatment centres, ensure that we've got more volume of cases being able to be treated, maximising the resources that we've got available to make sure we get through more cases and to tackle that waiting time issue.
What do you think those waiting time numbers should be by the end of the year?
Well, we've said that by 2026, April 2026, we want to have nobody waiting 12 months for an outpatient treatment.
Well, those numbers could go up. That 863,000 could go up, even if that figure goes down.
We're working hard to get those numbers down and to make progress, and that's the commitment.
Will that number go down?
I would. Yes, it will go down. Yes.
Right. Is your current Health Secretary, Neil Gray, just the latest fall guy? You're going to sack him, aren't you?
Not in the slightest. No way. Why would I do that?
Well, his waiting lists are up, all of the things we've already rehearsed.
It's tough out there, and I'm working really closely with Neil to make sure we've got all the resources and leadership and expertise in place to make sure we deliver for people in Scotland. That's what I'm about doing.
In February, I think in about a month or so, we'll have the implementation of the Prisoner Early Release Act, as it is. That's going to see instantaneously hundreds of prisoners let out from Scotland's jails due to the straining problems and capacity issues we've got. In the last 17 years, the SNP, you've been central to this in government, has failed to build new prisons like HMP, the replacement Barlinnie, the replacement HMP Highland. This is an SNP problem caused by the SNP and worsened by the SNP.
No, we've obviously had a prison building programme which has taken its course, and we've invested in new capacity. We're already imprisoning a much larger proportion of our population than most other countries. Mm-hmm. So we're already imprisoning a lot of people. And the changes that we're making are about bringing forward from 50% to 40% the amount of time that some prisoners serve. And of course, it's not everybody. It's a condensed number, and that's to address again the implications of the COVID period, where we're catching up with a lot of criminal cases. That's resulting in an upsurge in the prison population, and we've got to take steps to moderate that.
But all people are going to hear is violent people, potentially, people who are a danger to society or who don't believe or respect society's values and rules being let out early under your government.
Well, I think that's a sweeping generalisation, because there's a lot of work goes on to try to make sure that prisoners take a different course of life when they come out of prison, and that's an important part of the work that we undertake to make sure we can properly support the rehabilitation of prisoners so they don't come out of prison and return to what happened before.
So you think concerns from people on the street about all of these prisons being let out
I never dismiss people's concerns. If people are concerned, then it's up to me to listen with care, and I think I've got a pretty good reputation for listening with care to people in the country and making sure we do our best to address their circumstances.
On the topic of concerns, in 2021, Nicola Sturgeon said concerns from women about the controversial gender self-ID plans were not valid. Do you agree with that?
I think it's important that the important protections that are in place for women, which are contained within the Equality Act 2010, are put into practice, and that's what we should do.
So is that a yes?
Well, I'm giving you my answer. That's what we should do. We should make sure that what's in the law just now is put into practice.
But were the concerns valid?
Well, obviously, if people are concerned about issues, we've got to take them seriously, and I've given a response as to what you do to address that concern, which is that you make sure the Equalities Act 2010 provisions, which allow for example, single-sex spaces, to be able to be put into practice.
But taking them seriously doesn't mean that you think they were valid. Do you think that the concerns raised at the time were valid?
You've got to, well, if people raise their concerns, you've got to listen to them and to address them, and I've just done that for you.
You still haven't answered the question.
Well,
Were they valid? Were they valid, though?
I've just answered your question. I've given you what we've got to do in those circumstances.
Do you think that that policy was arguably the biggest policy mistake that you and Nicola Sturgeon made?
Obviously, it's been very controversial, and the legislation has been challenged by the UK government, and I can't unblock that.
But if that isn't the biggest mistake that you made with Nicola Sturgeon, what was?
I'm looking forward.
Well, I'm looking back.
Well, I'm looking forward. I'm looking ahead. You've
been around for a while, First Minister. I think it's a fair question.
Well, yeah, and Scotland's in a stronger place as a country as a consequence of what the SNP government's done. So we've got lower child poverty than the rest of the UK. We've got stronger early learning childcare provision.
We've got buzzer at this point.
We've got. I'm giving you substantive evidence of why Scotland's a better place as a consequence of what we've done and the actions I've taken in government. I want to build on them. I want to continue to improve Scotland. That's what I'll do.
Reflecting on what you have done, and you've been in power for 17 years as a party, you must have a reflection on what was the biggest mistake. I'm thinking potential things like behaviour at football or named persons.
Well, let's look at the fact that when the public have been asked how the SNP has got on in 2011, 2016, 2021, the SNP were returned to government when all these issues were playing out. And I want to make sure we're returned to government in 2026.
So you wouldn't pick anything?
Yeah, I'm just looking forward, that's what I'm doing.
All right, so I think we're running a bit out of time, so we're going to move to some quick-fire questions. This is where I'm going to use my buzzer because I like my buzzer quite a lot. Who's your favourite MSP from another party?
Liz Smith.
Why is that?
She's a genuinely decent individual and a thoughtful person who thinks outside party confines.
Fantastic. What is the biggest mistake you personally have made in politics? Was it retiring last year?
Oh no, that was a sensible move. I think probably standing for the SNP leadership in 2000. I wasn't ready for it.
Mm-hmm. When will Scotland next vote on independence?
Soon.
When?
Soon.
When?
Soon.
I'll ask one more time. When?
Soon.
All right, so this is winner stays on. I'm going to give you two names, and it's whoever you think is the best politician of the two. John Swinney or Russell Findlay?
John Swinney.
John Swinney or Anna Sarwar?
John Swinney.
John Swinney or Ian Murray?
John Swinney.
John Swinney or Rachel Reeves?
John Swinney.
John Swinney or Sir Keir Starmer?
John Swinney.
John Swinney or Stephen Flynn?
John Swinney.
John Swinney or Kate Forbes?
John Swinney.
John Swinney or Nicola Sturgeon?
John Swinney.
It's very confident.
Got to be.
That's it. What's your go-to movie?
My go-to movie? I think probably if I'm wanting to feel really kind of hopeful, I think I'd probably go to Paddington. I think.
Paddington.
Yeah.
So who would play you in a movie? Would it be Ben Whishaw who plays? I think he plays Paddington, doesn't he? Or something, I can't remember who it is.
I don't understand your question.
Who's going to play you in a movie?
Or me? Sorry.
In John Swinney the movie.
Goodness knows who would play
Bruce Willis.
Possibly. Actually, someone confused me for Bruce Willis once in the dark and distant past. So maybe.
How did that come about?
Oh God, it was some random.
What's your favourite fact about Butte House?
I think my favourite fact about Butte House is the story behind the Millennium Collection, which is a lovely silver collection, which brings together silversmith artists from all over Scotland two of whom are now constituents of mine, who've produced a most beautiful silver collection, which is on loan to Bute House, I must add, very generously from the Society or the Incorporation of Goldsmiths and Silversmiths of Edinburgh, I think is their proper Sunday title, and it's absolutely beautiful.
So we'll rattle through the next ones. At home with a good book or out walking up a Munro?
Out walking a Munro.
Square or link sausage?
Square.
We already know your favourite Taylor Swift song is You've Got to Calm Down.
Yes. There are others.
What's your favourite Oasis song?
Oh, couldn't tell you. Not interested.
Definitely, maybe.
I couldn't tell you any of them.
No, not going to go.
Couldn't tell you any of them.
Not going to see them in Murrayfield?
No.
What's your go-to karaoke song?
Oh my goodness. I've not been at karaoke for what would I say? I don't know.
Caledonia.
Maybe Caledonia. Yeah, that's quite a good idea.
Yeah. You've been talking about your love of park runs recently. How many park runs have you done?
Park runs, I think I've done probably about 30 park runs, because I do them intermittently. But if I was to get my Runkeeper app out, it would show that I've probably recorded in excess of 800 runs.
Yowzers. Okay.
So it'll be of that order.
How many park runs have you volunteered at?
None. That's a bit poor.
Can you make a commitment to us today that you'll volunteer at a park run in the next few weeks?
I would love to, but I love going to the park runs for the community of it and the running. Certainly the next few weeks I couldn't, because I need every available mile to contribute to my Doddy Aid total, which this morning, I don't know if you can follow my video this morning, but this morning I did a run at about 6:30 this morning. And because of doing that, I reached 26.2 miles, which is a marathon. So that's me done a marathon so far, and I'm hoping I can do another marathon before the period is up.
What's your personal best on your park run?
My personal best is about 25:50, I think.
And what's the distance on that, 5K?
5K.
5K. Far faster than I could ever do it.
Just in the interest of total transparency, I can't do that just now. Right? So last week, I was there on Saturday in Perth, and I managed to get it under 30 minutes, so I was really pleased about that, because the last one I was over 30 minutes. I was hacked off at that.
So last question, how do you feel about being labelled John Swinney and as one of the sexiest men in Holyrood?
Well, it's nice to hear that. It reminds me of being described as Scotland's most eligible bachelor in about 2000 actually, just when I became SNP leader at the time. And it led to the headline, "From Bank Manager to Babe Magnet," which caused great hilarity. And so there you go, that's rather nice.
Would you argue you've got better with age?
Like a good wine, I've perhaps matured.
First Minister John Swinney, thank you very much. That's all we've got time for today. From the top of the Scottish Parliament, thank you very much at home for watching. We'll speak to you soon. Goodbye.